Today, I want to talk a little bit about studying at community colleges in the United States, what some of the benefits are about studying at a community college in the US versus like a full four-year institution. And then also kind of go through the process of once you're accepted into community college in the US, sort of what the next steps are and how to go through the visa process up until the point where you get your visa and you're preparing for your departure. So first I want to just start with why community college? I mean, why would you want to go to a community college in the United States? First of all, what I'd like to say is that community colleges, although most of them are quite large because they are catering to a sort of a larger population, that's why it's like a community college, but they tend to be a little bit larger campuses, and they also tend to be leaders in like cutting edge fields such as like IT industry and biotechnology and engineering and so on. And they also have many sort of satellite offices. It's not always just one campus. They might have several campuses throughout a county or throughout a state in the United States. But one of the good things about community colleges is that the class sizes tend to be a little bit smaller than if you were attending sort of a regular four-year institution. And this a lot of times makes it easier for foreign students to adjust to the pace of a US academic life. Sometimes it can be daunting if you have, if you're not familiar with the US curriculum and how the academia is taught. So kind of makes it a little bit easier to settle in, and then gives you an opportunity to practice your English, of course. And some people just prefer that pace. And with community colleges, they also tend to be more flexible when it comes to their admissions requirements, because sometimes you have standardized tests that are taken into consideration when you are applying for a college or university in the United States. And community colleges a lot of times may not require these standardized test scores, or they may just have different admission policies. So it's a little bit easier, I would say, to kind of get into a community college, which can then sort of boost you toward a four-year undergraduate college. The community colleges they're designed for two-year programs for Associate of Arts degree or Associate of Science degree. It's a two-year degree that you can then apply the credits that you earn through that school into like a four-year institution, and almost expect to have all of your credits accepted, because a lot of times there's agreements between the community colleges and the other institutions for accepting all of the credits that you earned in those 2 years and applying them toward your degree at the four-year institution. Of course, one thing that is required is English language proficiency. And most people will have taken like a TOEFL or an IELTS exams and have those scores that they can present to the school admissions office. But another advantage of community colleges is that they will often have introductory English courses that you can enroll in to improve your English language proficiency, which is very useful, very helpful for people that still feel like they need to just get a little bit more experience or a little bit more understanding, better understanding of the English language. And another really nice thing about community colleges is that they have a variety of support services at their institutions. Support services that can include sort of cross-cultural programs, tutoring, advising, student advising, career planning, trying to set your long-term goals, counseling, and so on. And a lot of these programs, they're geared towards international students. And last thing about why attending community colleges is, of course, just friendships and relationships that you'll build and form as being a student there. I know a lot of Americans are very curious about foreign students on their campuses. They want to learn about their cultures and just kind of like learn about where they come from and their experiences growing up overseas, abroad. So it's one of the rewarding aspects of attending any university in the United States, but in this case, community colleges, since that's what we're talking about today. But for the sort of process of entering into a community college, first of all, you need to do your research. Something you should start maybe 12 to 18 months before you plan to enroll in a school. Doing your research, finding out why you want to study in the U.S., what you would want to study in the U.S., which institutions might match your priorities and your long-term goals, and where you will best fit with an institution, and then find out, obviously, a lot of schools, they offer financial aid or scholarships or grants that you may want to research as well to help offset some of the costs of studying at a community college. One thing I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention it now, is that community colleges tend to be less expensive than four-year institutions in the US. So for a lot of people, this is seen as a cost-saving advantage for your education. And still earn the credits that you can use to apply toward the four-year university or the four-year institution. So it's a little bit of an advantage to pay less in tuition costs at the community college level, and then still have your credits transferred to a four-year university or institution. And then, of course, it's important to know about deadlines. Deadlines for applications, deadlines for applying for financial aid. It's always very important to keep those deadlines in mind and just kind of have a timeline as to when you want to get there and then what you need to do before you get there. Next thing you need to do is make sure you have adequate finances to cover the costs of studying at community college in the US. And again, take into mind different types of financial aid or scholarships that you might qualify for as being an international student, because there are a lot of offers out there for international students, because U.S. institutions do want to attract international students. It adds to the diversity of the university, and diversity is very sort of it's very important in American society, American culture in the United States. Diversity. One important thing that you take into consideration is that for the purposes of attending a community college in the U.S. financially, you must be able to show your ability to cover all costs for the first year at the institution, for the first year. Next thing you need to do is you need to get accepted. And it has to be by an accredited and certified institution that is listed on the Department of Homeland Security's study in the US website, there's like 300 pages of higher education institutions that your institution must be accredited. Most all are. So it's just a matter of verifying that your institution would be on that list of accredited universities, accredited higher education institutions in the US. And then once you do get accepted, you'll be assigned a designated school official, essentially a person that helps you get through the process of all the paperwork that is required for applying for your visa and preparing for your transit to the United States and enrolling in school, staying enrolled in school throughout the program, and then ultimately leaving the program once you've achieved your goals and are ready to return or ready to exit the United States after your education. They'll also be the ones that issue your I-20 form, which is basically your acceptance. It's kind of like an acceptance letter that the school issues. It says that this individual is accepted into our institution. And then it'll also put your information into the student and exchange visitor information system called SEVIS that I'll explain a little bit more later. And one of the important things to remember is that your course of study when you're studying in the US needs to be at least 18 credit hours a semester. And that's something that you can research on the educational institution's website. Now what I would like to do is move into a presentation that we have prepared for going through the student visa process. My colleague has put this up on the screen. Hopefully you all can see it. And essentially it just talks about the process of applying for an F1 visa, which is the class visa that would be used for studying at a community college in the US. So next slide, first slide. And as I mentioned, these are some of the things that I'm going to talk about in the coming slides. And of course, a student visa, F1 visa, or any kind of visa is really just permission for an individual to enter the territory of the United States. And it's important to understand that it's only permission. When you arrive at the port of entry in the United States, there will be a Customs and Border Protection officer who will ultimately decide if you may enter the territory of the United States. And obviously the visa is one of the first steps that, in that process. This presentation does cover several different visa classes. However, my primary focus today is the F visa, which is the student visa, which is the type visa that you would be applying for to plan to attend a community college in the United States. Community colleges, there are several. I mean, this is just a fraction of the different fields or areas of study that you can focus on in the United States. These are all offered at community colleges as well. And I mean, as you can see, business and management and engineering take up a huge chunk of the different fields of study, but you can pursue just about any field of study. Of course, doing your research, finding out which institution has the programs that will most closely meet your needs, your priorities, your goals. Okay, the visa process, it's as the slide says, you know, they're worldwide processes, and then you have to get an appointment, and your visa can be issued up to 120 days before the program start date, which is a date that's listed on the I-20 that the school produces that says this is the date that you can enter the United States to start your studies. And as a F1 visa holder, you are entitled to travel to the US 30 days in advance of that start date. And that's sort of like a grace period for you to adjust, get settled in, kind of, learn your surroundings and just kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like to attend classes. So it's a 30-day grace period. I'll skip that last bullet because it doesn't really pertain to the F visas. All right, when you're applying for your visas under the current posture at the US embassies, it varies by country based on the severity of the current pandemic that we're going through. But for Kyiv, of course, our applicants and employees at the embassy are of greatest concern to us, and their health is of greatest concern to us. So we are adjudicating student visas currently, and we consider those to be expedited appointments, especially in the, in the coming school year. I mean, currently right now, this is March, so most people are already in school. But I mean, if you're looking to enroll in the fall of 2021, hopefully you already have started your research and been in touch with schools and so on. But you can apply for your visa 120 days in advance of when the program would start. You just can't enter within 30 days of the start date of the program that's listed on your I-20. Of course, you have to wear your face masks and follow social distancing rules. And we've put a lot of policies in place when you come to the embassy. You'll notice it's very sort of spread. Appointments are spread out. Waiting areas are spread out. Of course, wearing your mask. We have sanitation stations and so on. Everything to make the process doable, but also keeping our employees' health and safety in mind. And of course, if you do not feel well on the day of your interview, you really must reschedule. Excuse me. All right, so some of the steps for the process is completing the DS-160, which is an application for a visa. Cost is $160. You pay that fee and you arrange for an appointment. For an interview, there's also the SEVIS fee, which is the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System database. You pay that fee as well. For F1 visas, it's $350. F1 primary applicants, visa holders are eligible to take their family with them to the US if they're going to be studying. You can take your spouse and children. They cannot work, but they can travel to the US on an F2 visa class, which is a derivative, and it's only for the spouse and children. You cannot take your parents with you on F visas. There's only one SEVIS fee that needs to be paid for the principal applicant. The spouse and children will not need to pay an additional SEVIS fee, but they will need to have their own I-20 issued to them by the school. You want to make sure that your passport's valid. That's something that's very, very, very easy to overlook. So check it 3 times to make sure that at a minimum, absolute minimum, your passport must be valid for at least 6 months after your date of entry into the US. But even so, I mean, if it's close, try not to take any chances. Try to renew your passport so it'll be valid for another 10 years and you won't have to worry about that at all during your studies. And one other important thing that I did want to mention was that in applying for a F1 visa, it's helpful to apply in your home country. Of course, if you're in Ukraine, applying at the embassy in Kyiv. But if you're a third country national currently residing in Ukraine and looking to study in the US, it's helpful to return to your home country and apply, just because they're more familiar with so many of the local the local rules, laws, priorities in that country, and it's just easier, but not impossible. Just keep that in mind. All right, next slide. We've prepared, embedded a small video here that just shows you how to check your SEVIS fee payments regarding the SEVIS fees. And next, these are the items that you would bring to your interview. Of course, your passport, photo that can be uploaded into our systems at the embassy, your confirmation page from your DS-160, your I-20 form that's signed by your designated school official as well as yourself, and then a receipt for your SEVIS fee that it was paid. Just some simple reminders: arriving early. Don't bring a lot of extra things, because there's nowhere to store these items when you enter the embassy. So just leave them at home if you can. Go through security. You'll go to consular intake, so someone will take your documents and process you through. And next slide. And then you'll wait for your number to be called to interview with a American officer. And important to just relax and be honest. You know, we know that you've already gone through quite a lot to get to this point in the process. So we try to be easy and flexible as well. So yeah, just relax, I think, is the key thing. Next slide. And pretty simple questions, where are you going? Why do you want to go there? What do you want to do? How are you paying for it? And, what are your plans afterwards? Some of the outcomes, your application can be approved and you're overjoyed and excited and thinking about, what you got to do now that you have an F1 visa, which is your permission to apply for entry to the United States. There are some other outcomes. It could be refused. There could be something that doesn't match up with what the interviewing officer is seeing, and your application could be refused under 214B of the Immigration and Nationality Act of the United States. It could also be temporarily refused because there's some additional processing that has to take place, or there could be some other ineligibility for you. Next slide. Yeah, in the case of 221G, it's really just additional processing. It's usually pretty quick, but depending on the reasons, times can vary. But you'll be told what to expect and what to do next. Here's some visa myths for you to kind of read through. That's as I said, be honest in your interview. You can attend any university on an F1 visa, but of course you'll be applying on the terms of the institution that you applied for initially. Try not to use visa fixers. It's a waste of your money. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that American students and American institutions welcome and value contributions made by international students. So it's a win-win for both. Next slide. Some things to keep in mind: that yes, you may work on your F1 visa 20 hours a week as long as you're continuing to take a full course load, which is 18 hours. I'll skip that bullet. After completing your first full year at an institution, you can apply for permission to work off campus, but you must have completed a full academic year of your studies. And your designated school official, your DSO, is really going to be a great primary point of contact for you throughout your entire stay as an F1 student in the United States. They are a wealth of knowledge and someone who you'll want to stay in close contact with. And if you do work without authorization in the U.S., the penalties can be quite severe, and you can be forced to leave the United States, and maybe have implications later on in your life if you try to apply for another U.S. visa. One thing I want to mention is that you can apply for extensions in the U.S. on your F1 visa. If you notice that you're on your I-20, it's getting close to expiring, you can apply for extensions through USCIS, which is also something that you would do through your designated school official. And also in working with your designated school official, they're obviously going to be maintaining information on you for remaining in status, in student status, which is very important. And you can check your status as a student on the Immigration Customs Enforcement website, ICE website, maintaining your immigration status while a student in the U.S. And of course, that is one way for USCIS to check that you are still in status, because if you're not, then bad things can happen and you can be asked to leave the United States. And as we wrap up, these are just some resources, some sites that you can go to find out more information. The J1 visa.state.gov is obviously for a different visa class, not covered in this presentation, but the others are useful sites for you. And ways to contact the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv through email addresses, as well as different social media platforms. One thing I do wish to share with you is that on this coming Saturday, on March 20th, there is an Education USA virtual community college fair. It's a 6-hour event that will be taking place virtually. And I will be participating in the 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. time slot, Eastern European time, so Kyiv time, 3 to 5 on Saturday, to answer any questions that anyone might have regarding studying at community colleges in the U.S. My colleague will share a website, or sorry, a link to the site where that virtual fair will be taking place.